and welcome back to Focal Point AFR Talk. Brian Fisher is my name. You heard the spot. We are partnering with India Partners right now for these next 2 weeks. And our goal is to provide 35,000 nights of rescue and care for children, especially for girls that are trapped in the red light district of Mumbai, India. Some of these girls as young as 8 are introduced into the sex trade. They grow up in the filth. They grow up in the squalor. They grow up in the corruption. They see things. They experience things that no child should see. And India Partners has established these safe houses for these young girls. Now, these kids are not kidnapped from their mothers. Their mothers want something different and better for them than they themselves are experiencing. So when they are approached by the people in these safe houses, by India Partners, would you like us to provide a safe place for your daughter, room and board, full-time school, private tutoring, medical attention, counseling, and introduction to the person of Jesus Christ? Would you like us to provide that kind of safety for your child? And the moms say yes. They're living lives of just almost unimaginable oppression and abuse, treated basically like human garbage. They're basically sex slaves. They want something better for their daughters. And you and I, ladies and gentlemen, we've got an opportunity to do something about that by working with India Partners. For $7.08, you can provide 1 day of safety, rescue, and care for a child escaping the red light areas of Mumbai. $100, you can provide about 2 weeks of safety, rescue, and care. For $212, you can provide a month of safety, rescue, and care. That's what Debbie and I are going to try to do, try to provide 30 nights of safety, rescue, and care for one of these children in the red light district. If you've got $2,500 that you can send this way, you can provide an entire year. For $2,500, you can see to it that one of these children, an 8-year-old girl, Mumbai, India, has the opportunity to find safety, rescue, and care for an entire year. The number to call is 800-678-9962. That's 800-678-9962. Or you can give online at afr.net. So let's work together to provide rescue, safety, and care for needy children in Mumbai. Now, one thing I want to clear up yesterday, I forgot to address this yesterday. I had a caller that said that Christ came from the line of Lot. Lot, remember, had 2 daughters. They lived in a cave because of his fear. His wife was turned into a pillar of salt. The girls wanted children. They wanted to have family, but Lot wasn't going to go anywhere, wasn't going to let them out of it. So finally they get him drunk, seduce him, sleep with him, and they have children through incest. And this caller yesterday said one of those sons was in the line that led to Christ. That's not true. It is simply not true. The line of Christ came from Adam through Abraham, down through David, and then to Christ, the line of Lot, not a part of the line that led to Jesus. Now, you had people like Rahab, who was a prostitute. She was brought into the line of the Messiah, again, as an expression or a manifestation of God's desire to restore and to redeem. Remember, she placed her faith in the God of Israel when the spies came into Jericho, and she was honored for her faith, and she was delivered along with her entire family. You know, and you have Perez, who was the son, the offspring of Judah, and Tamar. Tamar was his daughter-in-law. Her son died, and Judah did not fulfill his responsibility to her to see to it that she had another male come into her life to provide children by her. So she dressed up as a prostitute. She seduced Judah, and she conceived a child with him, and he became a part of the line that led to Christ. So there was a child that wasn't incest technically, because it was his daughter-in-law. He had no blood relationship with her. But another way you could look at it, here is a child that was conceived through the act of prostitution. And that child became a part of the line that led to Christ. Again, manifestation of God's ability and his grace, his mercy, his willingness to extend himself, to reach down, to redeem, forgive, restore, and use us for noble purposes. So I wanted to clear that up at the beginning of the program today. Now, I want to talk a little bit about a 4-step template to defeat Darwinism. Defeating Darwinism in 4 easy steps. That's the title I want to hang on this little template. And I want to give you that little template. It's very easy to remember. We're going to walk through it, but I kind of want you to learn it because it's very easy to memorize. It's a 4-step template. Stick this in your brain. And you be prepared. I mean, I use this. I debated a philosophy professor at Boise State University a number of years ago on the issue of creation and evolution, kind of our own version of what Ken Ham and Bill Nye did last night. And I used this template in that debate with that philosophy professor at Boise State. It goes like this. Repeat after me. First law, second law, fossils and genes. That's it. Let's do that again, class. First law, second law, fossils and genes. Let's do it one more time. First law, second law, fossils and genes. Now, what do I mean by that? These are four very powerful scientific arguments against Darwinian evolution that also support the biblical account of creation. What do I mean? And let me mention first of all, and I've got a column up at rightlyconcerned.com if you want to go read it for yourself. It's a little bit longer than a normal column. It's about 1,700 words, but I wanted to be sure I was thorough. And there's just, of course, a ton of stuff I left out. But there's one point I want to make about evolution before we go any further, and that is that if evolution is true, there would not be any way for us to know it. Now, why do I say that? Because Darwinian evolutionists, they say that everything that has happened, everything that's come into existence, everything that does exist happens due to the random collision of atoms. Now think about that for just a second. If everything is the product of the random collision of atoms, there's no designer, there's nobody directing this, it's completely random. If everything is the product of the random collision of atoms, then that also applies to the thoughts that I am thinking about evolution. They are simply the product of this random collision of atoms. But if my thoughts are the product of this random collision of atoms, there's no reason to think that any of them are true. They just are. There's no way to prefer one thought over another because they're all just the product of the random collision of atoms. It'd be like saying, having people look at a whole swatch of Rorschach ink blots. You know what a Rorschach ink block is? They put a blot of ink on a piece of paper, fold it in half and unfold it, all kinds of strange shapes. And you were given, a whole sheet of these, and you were told, okay, pick out the true Rorschach ink blot. You would say, well, that's not possible. There's no true Rorschach ink blot because it's entirely, the process that produces them is entirely random. Now, this was what a thinker by the name of J.B.S. Haldane said, and I'm quoting him, and he wasn't a Christian, but he said this: if my mental processes are determined wholly by the motion of atoms in my brain, I have no reason to suppose that my beliefs are true. And hence, I have no reason for supposing my brain to be composed of atoms. So that's point number one. If evolution were true, there'd be no way for us to know it, because even our thoughts about evolution would be the product of an entirely random collision of atoms. Now, we'll probably go into the next segment to work through some of these points, so we may extend this into the next segment. Remember, here's our little pattern. Here's our template, four-step template: first law, second law, fossils, and genes. Now, the first law of thermodynamics is what I'm talking about, the first law of thermodynamics. Now, notice this is a scientific law. It's not a theory. It's a scientific law, and it teaches us that matter and energy can neither be created nor destroyed. That's the first law of thermodynamics. Neither matter nor energy can be created or destroyed. Now, what does the scientific law tells us? It tells us, this is a scientific law that says there is nothing in the universe, nothing in the observable universe that can explain either the origin of energy or matter, because it's a law that these things can neither be created nor destroyed. They're just there. Somehow they're there, and there's no process that we know of inside the observable universe, inside the universe, that could explain the origin either of matter or energy. So you take the logical extension, if there's nothing inside the universe that can explain the origin of energy or matter, what's the logical conclusion? Something outside the universe had to put it there. That's exactly what the Bible teaches us. So once again, the biblical account is perfectly consistent with scientific law, the first law of thermodynamics. So what this tells us then is that science, and we'll get in, we talk to Ken Ham and play one excerpt from the debate. Science, as done by man, has no explanation for the most basic question that could possibly be asked: why is there something rather than nothing? I mean, science has no answer for that question, but that's the most basic question, the most profound question you can ask. Why is there something rather than nothing? So creationists have an answer for that question. Evolutionists do not. Now, here is, you think about this. A couple of simple analogies. You see a turtle on a fence post. You've probably heard this before. You see a turtle on a fence post. What do you know as a matter of fact? You know as a matter of fact that somebody put him there, because turtles do not climb fence posts. Same deal. You see a world hanging in space. What do you know? Somebody hung it there. Now, and some people say, well, no, we got an explanation. We got the Big Bang. We got the Big Bang Theory. We got an explanation. It began with this incredibly dense ball of matter. It exploded and flung the universe into existence. In which case, our response to that question is, okay, where did that incredibly dense ball of matter come from? We're not going to spot you that. We're not going to give you that incredibly dense ball of matter. You have to explain where that came from. You think about some of the great thinkers like Aristotle, Socrates, for instance. Aristotle knew that there had to be what he called a prime mover or an unmoved mover. There had to be somebody there at the very beginning to kick the whole thing off, to start it, or there would be no motion. There would be no energy. There had to be a prime mover, an unmoved mover, someone who was responsible for initiating motion, but didn't have to be moved himself, because if everything was the product of secondary causes, nothing would ever happen. You got to have a prime cause somewhere. It's just logic. It's just philosophy. Aristotle could see it. Bill Nye can't see it. You and I can see it. So whatever process you observe where there's motion and energy, it could not possibly have started all by itself. You go into an office. Some of these guys have those little balls. There's a row of balls, and they just kind of swing back and forth. And so if you were to walk into somebody's office and those balls were bouncing back and forth, the ball in the end swings up in the air, it comes down, it clacks against the ball, and the last ball in the end, it swings up in the air, and then it comes back down and clacks the balls, and the one on the end swings back up again. And that can go on for a long, long time. I mean, if you don't stay in there long enough, you think maybe go on forever. Well, the one thing you know is somewhere that guy in that office lifted that ball to start that process. Didn't happen by itself. We have an answer. Evolutionists do not. Back in 2.